Right. So welcome everybody. We're so glad to have you here joining us tonight. I'm going to go ahead and mute you all so that we can focus on what David's telling us. If you accidentally unmute yourself during the class, we'll just mute you so that the sound doesn't bounce around. And while David's talking, if you think of questions for him, then you can type them in the chat to me. If you haven't used chat before, at the bottom of your screen, there's what looks like a little thought bubble, and you can click on that and type a question into me, Cantare Convivo Julie, and I'll field the questions to him when he breaks at about 3 different points. So, as David's sharing his screen, you might consider not sharing your video. So you would do that by clicking on the icon of the video camera where it says stop video. Doing that will mean that we'll be using less bandwidth and the picture quality may come through more clearly. So consider that. And we'll also be sharing out the recording tomorrow in case you want to rewatch any parts. All right, David, I'm going to unmute you and turn it over to you.
Got it. Well, I'm glad that you guys are joining me on this. It's a topic that I've taught on many times in college. Of course, it keeps changing and expanding, African American history and its impact on us today. And I did create some questions that I'll mail you after the class, but one of the things I'm wanting you to do is something that Anita just kind of started with. I want to personally share a little bit of my experience with African American culture. And then I want you to do that someplace this week and share that with somebody else so that you start to see what memories come to you. Because the music we study is absolutely related to the culture. Well, my personal introduction to African Americans was as a young boy in 1957. I remember when the Little Rock Nine, they came to be known as that, integrated the high school in Arkansas, in Little Rock.
Yeah.
I remember my dad telling my brother and I, as he drove us to school, that this was a very special morning and what was about to happen, and that the president was sending in the army to the school to protect those students. Now, I was only 7 years old, but I didn't know anything about integration issues. I grew up in a Mexican social environment, but attended an English-speaking Baptist church, an elementary school there that was closest to us. We didn't attend that church as we went to the Mexican Baptist church, but I knew several who shared African heritage coming from the Dominican Republic or Haiti and Cuba, who were in LA. There were seminary students there attending the Spanish American Baptist Seminary, of which my dad was president at that time. When I was 9, we moved to an integrated community in the Crenshaw district of Los Angeles. And I went to junior high in that area, and I was exposed to African Americans, Asian Americans, along with a very diverse white community that included many people of Jewish faith, as I had only been in a Christian white school with just a few Mexican families from our own church. I was probably more at home in that junior high setting with my own ethnic identity as a Mexican, quite possibly than in any other time in my life. The racial tensions of the 60s were a part of my life, amplified by my father being fired from the English-speaking American Baptist Church where he was pastor in 1969. We were in Inglewood at that time on the LA border, and the community was beginning to integrate very quickly with African Americans. But that wasn't happening on the west side of the city. And the church voted to merge with the Baptist church on the other side of town, as many members were already moving there and moving to the suburbs. We had lived through the Watts riots in '65. We were just 3 miles away from that. The National Guard was on the corner with rifles and fixed bayonets. Martin Luther King had been murdered in '68. I was now in college. We were protesting the Vietnam War. Cassius Clay had changed his name and had taken a stance as a conscientious objector. My parents, along with several other families and all of us college students at the church, voted to stay, not move, and to integrate, and we lost the vote. And the next day, my father was let go. That was a major blow that shaped my future clear through today. I moved to Oakland in 1974 to start the Oakland Youth Chorus, and that was in the midst of a lot of Oakland tensions at the time, including a lot of bigotry and racism, problems with the police, They were huge. I taught at Merritt College over 40 years span, where students were predominantly African American, along with every president and most key college administrators, and that also shaped my life in the best of ways. On the music end, I was introduced to what was called Negro Spirituals in my integrated junior high choir by one who would become the leading expert in the field, Al McNeil, who is still alive today at 100 years of age. I was introduced to black gospel music by an African American USC peer who taught me the style, its history, one that was exploding in the 1970s. And then I went on to bring those two genres of music to life with every choir I've directed over my 51 years. And being a leader in the choral field and doing so with predominantly Caucasian choirs with which I worked. It wasn't always easy in opening that door in some church settings, but the outcome was always well worth the effort. Having these and many other personal experiences while working successfully in communities that were predominantly white have enabled me to see that I am also a beneficiary of white privilege, even though my ethnic roots and historical story differ dramatically from those whose roots lie in Europe. But I feel I bear responsibility in bringing justice to those who have been penalized by the systematic structures that are put in place over time, including today, by our country's lawmakers and citizens. And justice to me requires action. And that action is mostly giving back that which doesn't totally belong to me. Music can impact us further, I believe, when we know its context. At the same time, I'm totally aware that music also supersedes the boundaries of all those stories. I don't have to know what caused Verdi to write the Requiem, what he was thinking or experience, to experience the healing and the sounds within the work and the motivations that's there. But for me as a conductor, it does help. So as Julie said, if you have questions as we go, be sure you put them in chat, and I will get to them at the next break. So right now, I am going to go to a shared screen so you can go ahead and take yourselves and hide your videos while I set this up in just one quick second. I do that, click that, go there, play from start, and I think I'm there. I think you're able to see my screen.
Yes.
I'm going to take you through a little bit of African American history on this first session so we're all on the same page with that. I put some slides here together to show part of the natural beauty of Africa, particularly reflecting how it looks today as well as 400 years ago. It's a home to an incredible amount of plant and animal life that flourish within its climate. The slaves were captured. There were no volunteers. They were not looking to leave this continent. They were not interested in seeking religious freedom or a new future or long-term real estate investment. In large measure, humans have also made its land, as with most of the continents on Earth, also a slave to human greed as well. For months, sometimes as long as years, these Africans living in the early 1600s and soon-to-be slaves waited in the dungeons of slave factories that were scattered all around Africa's west coast. They had already made a long and difficult journey across Africa's interior, and now they were about to embark on what we call the infamous Middle Passage. And it's so named because it was the middle leg of a three-part voyage, one that began and ended in Europe. The major Atlantic slave trading nations, in order of numbers, were the Portuguese, the British, the Spanish, the French, the Dutch, and the Danish. Many of these had outposts on the African west coast where slaves were purchased. The Middle Passage began with going from Europe to Africa, carrying manufactured goods that included guns and ammunition and copper and cloth and trinkets and rum. And then from Africa to the Americas, where they would carry slaves and they would be delivered to Brazil or the Caribbean islands and the eastern seaboard of America. But at that time, in the Americas, the land was settled by the British and the Dutch and the French and the Spanish. And then the boats would sail back to Europe, and they would bring the goods that they had picked up from the Americas and the Caribbean islands, and which included a lot of rum and sugar from the islands, and cacao, for chocolate from South America, and tobacco, and of course cotton. This was the largest forced migration in history. It was run by companies and investors more than by individuals. Slaves were branded with hot irons. They were yoked together, making the journey from various parts of Africa to the west coast. The headroom in the ship was less than 5 feet, and then the sleeping shelves cut that in half. There could be 300 to 400 on board. There was little ventilation below, and they had to use public buckets for human waste. They were often muzzled. Many of them were thrown overboard, even though they were alive, if there was illness or it seemed that there wasn't enough food. This would not have been the first choice of the slave traders because they'd only get paid for the slaves that they could sell. They were virtually human cargo. Over 12 million slaves were shipped to the Americas beginning in the early 1600s, and over 640,000 were brought to what we now know as the United States. Scholars today believe that about 20% of those transported lost their lives in the journey. By the time of the Constitutional Convention in 1787, slavery in the United States was a reality. It could be found in all 13 colonies and was the core of the Southern colonies' agricultural economy. In 1790 census, 3.8 million people were counted in the entire country, and more than 700,000, or nearly 20%, were slaves. And Virginia claimed 39% of those. Being separated from family and tribal members, as well as the environment from which they came, these slaves were sent to work endlessly, 12 to 14-hour days in the fields and houses of their masters, having no rights, and now serve with this life sentence of injustice. In 1804, most northern states had effectively abolished the institution, finding that slavery was not profitable for them. In the South, however, slavery grew following Eli Whitney's invention of the cotton gin in 1793. You see that gin up there in the left-hand corner. It became a central part of America's economy and a way of life. Cleaning a 100-pound sack of cotton previously took a slave more than 3 months. Now it only took 1 day. The result was the explosive growth of the cotton industry that greatly increased the economically motivated demand of slave labor in the South. Between 1790 and 1830, the number of slaves in the United States increased from 694,000 to roughly 2 million, despite the federal law of 1807 that prohibited the importation of African slaves. They worked in coffee, tobacco, cacao, sugar, and cotton plantations. They also worked in gold and silver mines, rice fields, construction industry, cutting timber for ships, and in skilled labor and as domestic servants. They and their future children were legal property of their owners. They were considered merchandise, and they were sold at markets with goods and services. John Newton, the hymn writer of Amazing Grace, was formerly a slave trader. He told Parliament in 1790 that a captive cost about 3 pounds and sold for about 25 pounds in the Caribbean. Slaves were auctioned to the person bidding the most money for them. Families were split apart in the process, depending on the needs of the buyer. When the slave ship docked, slaves were taken off and placed in a pen. Then they would be washed and their skin covered with grease to make them look healthier. They would be branded if they hadn't been already. They were subjected to the most intimate and humiliating examinations as if they were animals in a market. Frederick Douglass, he was born into slavery in 1818 in Maryland until he escaped 20 years later, and he speaks of the horrible acts of separating children from their parents without any regard for the emotional ties between them. Slaves were tortured physically as well as emotionally. They were whipped at the discretion of the white slave owner at will, mostly because they could be. Douglas witnessed the physical and psychological cruelty. He saw his slaveholder, Mr. Covey, at times be comforting to him as a young boy, and then unleash a depth of brutality that exceeded imagination, even slave women. And he writes, laying on them 30 or 40 lashes until she could scarcely stand. This was often repeated. They were at the mercy of his passion. He goes on and says, Mr. Covey enjoyed the unbounded and very valuable reputation of being the first-rate overseer and Negro breaker. He also tells us that Mr. Covey had no issue with going back to church each Sunday, where he fulfilled his role as a deacon. Slave owners were both white and Christian and viewed African spirituality as evil, not understanding this culture that paid homage to nature and other forms of life, and the source of life known by many different names. Reverend John Cotton, the Puritan theologian who comes from England to Boston and grandfather of Cotton Mather, drafted New England's first constitution in 1636, which legalized enslaving the captives. The slave owner did not understand their music, the drumming, the dancing, the body decorations, and a host of other spiritual African arts. These African slaves were soon to be Christianized by their owners, who rationalized their justification for slavery using both the Old and New Testaments. But as most things, economics and greed are really the driving force behind all of that. The Fugitive Slave Clause is a part of the Constitution. It's going to be amended in 1850 as territorial boundaries areas are shifting in the United States, having grown through land grabs, rationalized as part of God's designed intention. There's a lot of greed in that story. And the issue of slavery is going to rise with these new territories. And there's going to be a compromise between between what's called the Southern slaveholding interest and the Northern free soilers. In response to the weakening of the original Fugitive Slave Clause, with the importation of slaves now illegal since 1808, the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 penalizes officials who did not arrest an alleged runaway slave and made them liable to a fine of $1,000. That's about $31,000 today. Law enforcement officials everywhere were required to arrest people suspected of being a runaway slave on as little as the claimant's sworn testimony of ownership. The suspected slave could not ask for a jury or testify on his own behalf. In addition, any person aiding a runaway slave by providing food or shelter was subject to 6 months imprisonment and a $1,000 fine as well. Officers who captured a fugitive slave were entitled to a bonus or a promotion for their work. Since a suspected slave was not eligible for a trial, the law resulted in a lot of kidnapping and conscription of free blacks into slavery. Moderate abolitionists were faced with the immediate choice of defying what they believed to be an unjust law or breaking with their conscience and beliefs. This is the arena in which Harry Beecher Stowe writes, Uncle Tom's Cabin. 8 of the first 10 United States presidents were slave owners. 12 of the first 18. Thomas Jefferson, who famously declares in his Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal, held as many as 223 slaves at one time. His family sold his slaves after his death in an effort to pay off the debt of his estate. George Washington and his wife held over 300 slaves. Benjamin Franklin also had slaves. Okay, I'm going to take you off shared screen, and if you have any questions, I'm going to see what Julie has with any of those.
Just one question so far. Who captured the Africans to put them on slave ships, and who paid for this roundup?
The Europeans who came over from their countries would find Africans who were willing to bring these slaves from countries. So there were Africans involved in the slave trade on the African side of the equation. And then you have to remember these Europeans are also going to take ownership of a lot of Africa most of the countries of Africa were owned by European countries or run by European countries. So that ability to do that was moved very freely. So Africans on the African side did participate in the slave trade. Absolutely, for sure. For
And was
certain.
that motivated by a trade of goods or money or
Probably
both?
money. Yeah, money, greed. Yeah, money usually does the trick for most of those kinds of things.
That's the only question so far.
Okay, let me move now into minstrelsy. This might be an area that we know or you know a little bit less about. I don't know. I'll be playing you some songs, but first let me just tell you a little bit about this story so you get a sense of what it is. When we talk about minstrels, we're usually initially referring to people who sang and entertained during the Middle Ages. They were called minstrels. They might recite poetry as well while accompanying themselves, usually on like a lute or equivalent of a guitar. They would tell stories, they'd create tales that were imaginary, and they mostly performed for nobility. But when we talk minstrelsy in America, we're looking at the 1830s forward. Minstrelsy became really a national entertainment force that traveled the entire country, soon coast to coast, bringing with it music, skits, jokes, acrobatic acts, a full variety show. They were more popular in the North and in urban areas than in the South. They usually consisted of 12 to 15 white players who would blacken their faces with burnt cork or grease. They'd speak in heavy dialects that caricatured the African slaves, because you have to remember that slaves didn't come here speaking English. And in Africa, there is no TH sound. And the dialects don't even have a V sound. That's why when we sing spirituals or hear the language that's used, it's always dis, dem, der. These are the best they can do. Or like in Spanish, the V is often like a B. So it's the river Jordan. Every culture has its own tricks with language. Mexicans don't have the SH sound. My mother constantly called it a chandelier, and people always called it a Chevy, And Asians have troubles with R's and L's, and Germans have trouble with U's and W's. That's just part of the culture. They performed songs, though, and dances and jokes to entertain the white Americans. That's a part of the minstrelsy. So it's the first national show business formula, and it's going to dominate the culture until the 1880s. Minstrels portrayed blacks as totally inferior. They created two sets of contrasting stereotypes. There's the happy, frolicking plantation darky, and then there's the foolish, inept urban fool. In the minstrel shows, blacks lived either on southern plantations where they were contented and secure, or in northern towns where they were bewildered and insecure, which is probably a lot like the way many of the white audience people felt that had left their farms to move to the cities. But minstrelsy's northern black characters were not just common people suffering anxieties of urban life. They were ignorant, bumbling buffoons who were totally out of place outside the South. That's the way they were portrayed. When you see some of the skits and jokes, a black brakeman on a train spent all day with doing what? Breaking into luggage. A drunk claimed he was a lawyer because of all the practicing he had done at the bar. A cook would hung up the toast in order to dry it. And black soldiers, when ordered to fall in, they'd fall in the lake. No one in the audience could have been this stupid. The spectacle they presented, however, allowed white audiences to laugh and to look down at blacks. The minstrel show's message was that black people belonged only on southern plantations and had no place at all in the North. Songs like Dixie, that's a northern minstrel. It's introduced in New York in 1859. But it underscores that message, having northern blacks wish they were in the land of cotton. Old times there are not forgotten. Look away, Dixieland. And Dixie's a great hit in the North before it becomes the unofficial Confederate national anthem. The minstrels had a long-lasting impact of these cruel stereotypes that remain in popular culture even today in various settings. And again, abolitionist Frederick Douglass denounced black-faced performers in his writings. He says, "The filthy scum of white society who have stolen from us a complexion denied to them by nature, in which to make money and pander to the corrupt taste of their white fellow citizens. That's how he viewed it. Minstrelsy begins with Thomas, nicknamed Thomas Daddy Rice. He's born in Manhattan, 1808. He was an actor, traveled around for various performances. He's in Louisville, Kentucky in 1828. He observes a stable hand out there on the town street, and this stable hand is doing this hopping around dance and singing, and he asks the slave his name, and the slave's response is Jim Crow, the name that will stay in history for naming the segregation laws of the late 19th century. Daddy Rice will publish the tune and call the song Jumping Jim Crow, along with imitating the slave in minstrel style who was singing it in his acts. Shortly afterwards, the minstrel troops are formed. First the Virginia minstrels, later on the Christie minstrels who played on Broadway. If you're my age, some of you might remember the new Christie minstrels from the 1960s who took on that name, though they didn't do minstrelsy, though they did do Dixie. The songwriter for the Christie minstrels back in the 19th century was the American songwriter Stephen Foster. You probably know his Beautiful Dreamer, or I Dream of Jeannie with the Light Brown Hair, that he wrote for his wife. He writes many of the songs that we know today that come from minstrelsy. The show is usually in two parts. You have this line of people. Mr. Bones is on one side, Mr. Tambo's on the other. Mr. Bones has these bones that he rattles, percussion. Mr. Tambo's playing the tambourine. In the center is the equivalent of the MC, the interlocutor, stands there. They always open with this chorus. Everybody is singing a song they know. Then there were the jokes between the MC in the middle and the two at the end. There's some comic songs or ballads or instrumental numbers. The second part would have a little bit of dramatic acting. And then everybody would be dancing while one at a time people got in the center and showed off what they could dance while the others sang and clapped. Some of the jokes still last with us today. Why did the chicken cross the road? Is one of those. I understand you went to the ball game yesterday afternoon. You told me you wanted to go to your mother-in-law's funeral. The response, I did want to, but she ain't dead yet. They use the word darkies or the N-word instead of slaves. After the Civil War, a large number of black performers broke into American show business as minstrels. They would paint their skin white and then put on blackface. They had to first win over these white audiences away from the white minstrel actors. And the way they did it was by claiming that they were authentic. Brooker Clayton's Georgia Minstrels billed itself in 1865-66, this is right at the end of the Civil War, as the only Simon pure Negro troupe in the world. And it claimed that it was composed of men who during the war were slaves in Macomb, Georgia, and who, having spent their life in bondage, will introduce to their patrons plantation life in all its phases. By the 1870s, black minstrels had become the acknowledged experts in plantation material. But the public still wanted the same stereotypes, so that's what they were given. In the 20th century, we see actors like Burt Williams and Stephen Fetchit. They maintain that tradition. The Blackface Act, kept alive by Caucasian actors like Al Jolson, Eddie Cantor, and many others, become just one of the standard vaudeville and musical comedy routines. Okay, I'm now gonna put you on a shared screen. So again, if you have your video on, go ahead and turn that off while I set this up. Shared screen. I always have to talk my way through it, make sure I'm doing it right. That looks like I did. Okay, now I'm going to play you a variety of different songs, and first I'm going to start with some Stephen Foster songs. You know, he's born in 1826. He doesn't live very long. By 1854, he dies. He's very depressed when he dies. He's considered the father of American music. He'd never been to the South, but he writes many of these songs that remain central in American vernacular music, though we've changed the words or omitted many of the lyrics. So I'm thinking before you now, you can find the lyrics to Old Susanna. And I'm sure many of you grew up from this. And here's what you're picturing. You are picturing a Caucasian person pretending to be a slave in blackface, looking happy, strumming along somebody on the banjo and singing these songs. And if you look at the spelling of the words, Foster even wrote them in the dialect of the slave. I was come from Alabama with my banjo on my knees. I was going to Louisiana, my true love for to see. That's what the slave hopes for. It rained all day the day I left. The weather, it was dry. Does that make any sense? The sun's so hot, I froze to death. Susanna, don't you cry. Does that make any sense? What's being portrayed in the song is this is just how dumb the slave is. Oh, Susanna, don't cry for me. Then you're going to see the use of the N-word. You're going to see the use of buckwheat in her mouth. You're going to see all this typical language. And I'm going to play you a version of that song, and I think this one might be...
Well, I comes from Alabama with my banjo on my knee, and I've gone to Louisiana, my true love for to see. Well, it rained all night the day I left, the weather it was dry, and the sun's so hot I froze to death. Susanna, don't you cry. Oh, Susanna, don't you cry for me. And I come from Alabama with my banjo on my knee. When I jumped aboard the telegraph and traveled down the river, the electric fluid magnified and killed 500 chiggers. When the bull jumped us, the horse ran off, I really thought I'd die. So I shut my eyes to hold my breath. Susanna, don't you cry. Oh, Susanna, don't you cry for me. Now I come from Alabama with my banjo on my knee. Now I had a dream the other night when everything was still, and I thought I saw Susanna, she was running down the hill. Now the buckwheat cake was in her mouth and a tear was in her eye. So I said, I'm coming from the south, Susanna, don't you cry. Oh, Susanna, don't you cry for me. Well, I come from Alabama with my banjo on my knee.
So that would have been one of the songs that they would use to open a show. Everybody in the country knew that song. And just like we sang it, you know, we sang them in school, our teachers would have never known their history as to where they came from. We never sang all those words, sang some of them, but they would have never correlated any depth to the meaning of the song, even though some of it's obvious. Another Stephen Foster song, Camptown Races. This is sung by Al Jolson, Vaudeville Entertainment, 20th Century. He's playing E.P. Christie in a movie that's coming out at that time, and he's going to sing this, and he is a part of the minstrel show of that era. That's the character he's playing in the movie.
We will conclude this part of the entertainment with a brand new song sung here in Chicago for the first time on any stage by myself and company. You Camptown ladies sing this song. Do-da, do-da. He camped town racetrack 5 miles long. I come down there with my hat caved in. I go back home with a pocket full of tin. Wind around all night, wind around all day. I bet my money on the bobtail nag. Somebody bet on the bay. The long tail filly and the big black horse. They fly the track and they both cut across. The blind horse sticking in a big mud hole. Can't touch bottom with a 10-foot pole. Wind around all night, wind around all day. I bet my money on the bobtail nag. Somebody bet on the bay.
Another minstrel song comes the state song of Kentucky, My Old Kentucky Home, another Stephen Foster song. You check the lyrics, you're going to read how content the darkies are and what they long for. And this, again, those words have all been changed for us, but this is the way he published them back in the day.
The sun shines bright on my old Kentucky home. This summer the darkies regain. The corn tops ripe and the meadow is in bloom, while the birds make music all day. The young folks roll on the little cabin floor, all merry, all happy and bright. By and by hard times come a-knocking at the door, then my old Kentucky home, good night. Weep no more, my lady. Oh, weep no more today. We will sing one song for the old Kentucky home, for the old Kentucky home far away. They hunt no more for the possum and the coon on the meadow, the hill and the shore. They sing no more by the glimmer of the moon on the bench by the old cabin door. The day goes by like a shadow over the heart, with sorrow where all was delight. The time has come when the darkies have to part, then my old Kentucky home, good night. Weep no more, my lady. Oh, weep no more.
just how happy the slave must be in this particular setting of life. All is well. Yellow Roses, Texas.
There's a yellow rose in Texas that I'm gonna see. No other soldier knows her, no soldier, only me. She cried so when I left her, it like to broke my heart. And if I ever find her, we never more will part. She's the sweetest rose of color this soldier ever knew. Her eyes are bright as diamonds, they sparkle like the dew. You may talk about your dearest May and sang of Rosalie, but the yellow rose of Texas beats the bells of Tennessee. Where the Rio Grande is flowing and the starry skies are bright, she walks along the river in the quiet summer night. She thinks if I remember when we parted long ago, I promised to come back again and not to leave her so. She's the sweetest rose of color this soldier ever knew. Her eyes are bright as diamonds, they sparkle like the dew. You may talk about your dearest May and sang of Rosalie, but the yellow rose of Texas beats the bells of Tennessee. My heart is full of woe. I'm going back to Georgia to find my Uncle Joe. You may talk about your Beauregard and sang of Bobby Lee, but the gallant hood of Texas, he played hell in Tennessee. She's the sweetest rose of color this soldier ever knew. Her eyes are bright as diamonds, they sparkle like the dew. You may talk about your dearest May and sang of Rosalie, but the yellow rose of Texas beats the bells of Tennessee.
You're the yellow rose of Texas this soldier ever knew. It's this darky ever knew. So again, it's a minstrel song. So you're picturing a white person, black-faced up, pretending to be a slave. And the yellow rose means that the girl is in love with is biracial. She is not just white. So it's this relationship that this slave has with this biracial woman. You know, now the song gets reinterpreted a lot of different ways, and the language gets changed. And it, you know, it's a very popular song. A lot of country singers sing it with changed words. Of course, it becomes it's real important in Texas. I know that. Next, I want to play you Dixie, so you can again sense the pride that is taken. That the North, that they want the Northerner to believe that slavery is just grand.
Okay, 1, 2, 3.
In the land of cotton, old time there, I'm not forgotten. Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. Dixie's land where I was born in early on one frosty morning. Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. And I wish I was in Dixie, hooray, hooray. stand to live and die in Dixie. Away, away, away down south of Dixie. Away, away, away down south of Dixie. Old Mrs. Mary Millie Weaver, William was a gay deceiver. Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. And when he put his arms around her, smiled as fierce as a 40-pounder. Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. And I wish I was in Dixie. Hooray, hooray, in Dixie's land I'll take my stand to live and die in Dixie. Away, away, away down south of Dixie. Away, away, away down south of Dixie.
The song goes on and talks about the relationships between those two people. Starts to leave the whole thing about this, the Dixie in the South. It starts to mix sort of a Scottish story, fable that goes along with it. But again, a song that is talking about just how wonderful it is down south in Dixie. Dixie, Mason-Dixon line being south of it becomes kind of the catchword. No one's dead sure just how that came about, but by here it's already known as that. And then I'm playing you one, Carry Me Back to Old Virginia, which was the state song for Virginia for almost 100 years. This song, and you can see the lyrics you have, this song is written by James Bland, who is an African former slave. He's an African American. And he is now part of a minstrel troupe as African, like I said, as former slaves, African Americans pick up the Minstrelsy Act. His father was the first black to graduate from college from Oberlin. And James, the son, will also do so. And he'll write this song, and he'll become quite a songwriter and a famous minstrel singer. So, and this is with original lyrics as well. So let me give attention here.
Cotton and the corn and taters grow. There's where the birds warble sweet in the springtime. There's where the old darkest heart am long to go. There's where I labored so hard for old Massa, day after day in a field of yellow corn. No place on earth do I love more sincerely than old Virginia, the state where I was born. Carry me back to old Virginia. There's where the cotton and the corn and taters grow. There's where the birds warble sweet in the springtime. There's where this old darkest heart and long to go. Back to old Virginia. There let me live till I wither and decay. Long by the old dismal swamp have I wandered. There's where this old darkest life will pass away. Master and Mrs. have long gone before me. Soon we will meet on that bright and golden shore. There from all sorrow. There's where we'll meet and we'll never part no more. Carry me back to old Virginia. There's where the cotton and the corn and potatoes grow. There's where the birds warble sweet in the springtime. There's where this old darkest heart longed to go.
Just have a little bit of time. You know, when I teach in school, I get 52 and a half weeks, 3 hours a week. But we're going to go fast, so I'm just keeping you going. Now I'm skipping ahead to Al Jolson, 1927, the movie The Jazz Singer. This is the first movie where they are able to attach sound to the reel, a talking movie. The only thing they attach to this is him singing a minstrel song. That's the only sound that occurs in the movie. You might have seen a clip before, but he is doing a minstrel character and he's singing to this woman, you know, convinced of, you see the relationship, the depth of love that he carries for this his mother. So let me just cue up to that so that you can see it. But again, such an impression, these make such an impression because nobody has seen anything like this on a movie screen. When people start to see things like this on movies, they think it's all real. Here we go.
The sun shines east, the sun shines west, but I know where the sun shines best. Mammy, Mammy, my heartstrings are tangled around Alabama. I'm a-comin', sorry I made you wait. I'm coming, I hope and trust I'm not late. Mammy, Mammy, I'd walk a million miles. The sun shines east, the sun shines west, but I know where the sun shines best. It's on my mammy I'm talking about, nobody else's, my little mammy. My heartstrings are tangled around Alabama. Mammy, I'm coming. I hope I didn't make you wait. Mammy, I'm coming. Oh, God, I hope I'm not late. Mammy, don't you know me? It's your little baby. I'd walk a million miles for one of your smiles. Oh, my me.
Next, I want to play you what's called patent juba. This is another form of music, and you saw a little tap dancing done in the Christie Minstrel show as well. It's another form of music. African slaves invented tap dancing. They weren't allowed to dance, but dancing, the European slaveholder, was considered crossing your feet. So they invent this new dance where your feet don't cross. That was tap dancing. Drums and percussion instruments were taken away because the slave owners feared they could communicate outside to one another using drums. But they invent the use of keeping rhythm by just using their body in what's called patent juba. And I'm going to show you this guy who demonstrates that technique. Let's see how inventive. see in this clip, let me get to the next one. What we see in this clip demonstrates, the inventiveness of an oppressed people who will not be stopped, who will continue to go on and find new ways to express themselves, their creativity, when all else has been taken away from them. Now I'm going to show you a black comedian, Bert Williams, who's well known for minstrelsy, probably the most famous of the period in the early 20th century. He'll work in vaudeville. W.C. Fields, who is going to appear with him, will describe him as the funniest man I ever saw and the saddest man I ever knew. He will become wealthy off his minstrelsy acts, his acting career as well. Not sure that you've seen him, but I'm going to play you this clip.
When life seems full of clouds and rain, and I am full of nothing and pain, soothe my thumping, bumping brain. Nobody. When winter comes with snow and sleet, and me with hunger and cold feet, who says if? And if I fancy, go ahead and get something to eat. Go on, why don't you? Nobody. I ain't never done nothing to nobody. I ain't never got nothing from nobody no time. Until I get something from somebody sometime. I'll never do nothing for nobody no time. When I was in that railroad wreck, thought I'd cashed in my last check. Who took the engine off my neck? Nobody. One time when things was looking bright, I started to whittle on a stick one night. Who cried out, "Stop now, that's dynamite"? Not a soul. I ain't never done nothing to nobody. I ain't never got nothing from nobody no time. Until I get something from somebody sometime. I'll never do nothing for nobody no time.
Another entertainer in movies, Stepin Fetchit was his nickname. He was always playing the buffoon in the movies. He, like Bert Williams, come from the islands, from the Bahamas, and Stepin Fetchit also has one relative from Jamaica. Stepin Fetchit will be the first black actor to become a millionaire. When somebody says, why do these people do this? It's because they could make a living off of it, because white people love to see them behave like this and act like this. So that was great motivation. Stepin Fetchit, this is a scene, Lazy Richard is the character.
Richard, can't get him up. Richard, can't get him up. Richard, can't get him up. Lazy Richard can't get him up. Richard, can't get him up.
rocking and rebopping. Why I have such a dream like that? I ain't bothering nobody, just busy tending my own business, doing nothing, resting up.
Ring it, can't get him up. Ring it, can't get him up. Ring it, can't get him up. Lazy Richard can't get him up.
Hey, that's the telephone. Who's that on that phone? My roommate downstairs knocking. Tell him I am Jones. Rave all you wanna, but tell him I'm so sure I ain't gonna open that door. Too much bed sharing, suit and rent. 11 months behind, ain't got a cent. Tell him go back where he got drunk at, 'cause that door is staying closed. There's that. Goodbye. You know that tent killing in that vacant lot is just ran to get this room he got. You phoning, he knocking, big loud mouth. Look like you're framing, trying to get me thrown out. And I told you, stop phoning like I told you before. That landlord's woke and that fuss got to go. I may be dumb, but this much I know. I ain't gonna open that door.
Richard, can't get him up. Richard, can't get him.
Another minstrel actor in TVs and movies, Scatman Crothers. I'm playing you one of his routines so you can see him. If you remember Chico and the Man, the TV series, he was Louis the Garbage Man in that show later on in life. But you'll see his comedy routine here.
And now, giving you noise in tempo, F.B. Miller and Scatman Crothers.
You the laziest man I ever did see. What's wrong with you now? What's wrong with you?
I'm tired.
Tired nothing. You can do nothing longer than anybody I ever did see.
But I don't feel well.
What's wrong with you?
Seems like every time I start to blow, I get the feeling
I had a feeling like that once. Yeah, you takes a deep breath and then you makes a high note and you feel...
That's it.
Well, what are you doing for it?
Well, I saw myself a music teacher, and he told me that he thought that I should,
Don't do it, you'll bust your jaws. Who was the music teacher what told you that?
Oh, you know the music teacher that teaches music in the town.
Oh, he
where...
ain't no good. No, the music teacher you want is the one what leads that band.
I had him, but he couldn't teach me nothing.
No?
Yeah, he's one of them teachers that teach...
I know. But he's got a system there where he makes you play...
Yeah, but that's old-fashioned.
Well, then what you need is a new trombone.
Yeah.
You know, one of them that you buys, that you pays...
Got one like it in heart, but I don't like it much.
Well, maybe you ought to be with a new band.
Yeah.
You ought to be with the band my brother was with. When he was traveling out there...
Was he out there?
Sure.
Oh, I thought all the time he was...
He did, but he quit.
Yeah, but what's he doing now?
Oh, he's with another troupe now. They're traveling out there in that place.
Is that so?
Yeah, he did.
They got girls with that show, ain't they?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Well, I suppose like all musicians, he's...
No, not him. He gonna get married.
Yeah?
Yeah, he gonna marry the daughter of what used to be...
That's a nice girl. But listen, I heard that one time she...
That was her sister. You see, I'm keeping company with her.
I know you know her.
Sure, I've been going with her ever since the
that
time...
long?
Sure I have.
You know, the funny thing, I was just talking to her father the other day, and the first thing I know...
That was your fault. Now, what you should have done was...
I did.
See that, boy? That's why I like to talk to you, because me and you can see the degrees of one another.
Well, I'll be seeing you.
Ready, boy. Ready, boy.
Come around.
Okay, I'm going to take you off of shared screen if you want to get your video back on. Whoop.
Miller and Scatman Carruthers.
Somehow I need to go stop that, don't I?
Go back to your Safari and then hit pause.
Yeah.
You can hit the icon in your dock.
Sorry. There's that.
There you go.
And that's good. Okay, let me just see what I got, where my stuff is here on my own screen. Okay, things shift in movies and television and minstrelsy. You know, it starts to find its way in all these new forms. Amos and Andy, the radio show, we were talking about it earlier, though it initially starts. Those are two Caucasian guys who started, but it's going to go to television, and it's going to be African-American actors who take it on in 1950. It's going to be a big hit, but soon African-American actors are complaining about shows, these minstrel shows, saying if that's all we do, we'll never get decent roles in movies. We won't be able to advance. And you got to remember, this is going to be the time that a very young Sidney Poitier is starting to make his way on the scene, and Ossie Davis and Dorothy Dandridge and a host of other people who are appearing in movies. So the changes start to take place. Now, there's lots of humor in making fun of others. There's no question about it. We do it all the time. Sometimes we make them around, they're gender jokes, women or men. There's dumb blonde jokes, a lot of ethnic jokes, even around the old derogatory jokes that we used to make around people labeled as morons. I remember growing up with those. And then there's all the TV shows. I Love Lucy, All in the Family, Maude, The Jeffersons, Roseanne, Sanford and Son, Cheers, Coach, Friends, Tool Time, George Lucas shows. I mean, all these shows are making fun of some kind of stereotype. And we laugh and we're entertained. So the question that comes, are they okay? Is it okay to laugh? Or when is it not okay? You know, how does this scenario change when it involves one culture making fun and portraying another culture in a derogatory way? Who determines when something is inappropriate? And then there's the money side. What if the actors are fine with it, so long as they're making money? So here we are looking back and recognizing the effects that have come into play, you know, with what happened about 200 years ago, over these 200 years. And those effects are real, no question about it. Look at how it shaped the culture, the dominant white culture in this case, into believing what was in the caricature was absolutely true. Okay, let me entertain any questions that you might have before I go on into the spirituals, because I got to keep us moving here. Julie, you got anything there?
Sure. A couple of questions related to language. When did the language get changed for these minstrel songs to become what we are used to hearing today?
Oh, bit by bit. I can't tell you specifically, but it's not hard in some. It's not hard with some of the folk songs, like "Oh Susanna," to look back at some of those publications in the United States, and the words are already changed. You know, from the early Stephen Foster words, so they'll get modified. That happens. Word changes happen a lot in music to suit the time. So it happens over a period of time, but certainly by the time many of you are in school, they've all changed, all gone.
And could you say something about if people are using the changed, modernized words, is it considered offensive to sing minstrel songs or teach them to children now that we understand their history?
Well, I think that is the question that we need to ask. You know, one of the minstrel songs is "Shoo Fly, Don't Bother Me." Shoo fly, don't bother me. Shoo fly. How many of you sang that to a kid? You know, comes out of the minstrel tradition. Uses the N-word throughout. Is it okay to take the tune, the change words, it's not a part of your life, and use it with your grandkid, with your kid? Is it okay to sing these songs that are absolutely American music? I think what is not okay is to choose to stay ignorant of their history. That's not okay. So that if they're to be used, people have to be aware of it. And on the other hand, there's plenty of good new folk songs. We're not confined to use those songs. you know. But we do not want to deny the history in which they came. So those are individual questions that we each have to answer, and we answer them differently. But part of the questions I'm going to leave you to think about this week are those very things. Who gets to determine? And often it's part of the audience who gets to determine. If you do something with me and I said, I'm offended by that, I'm hoping that you say, well, I won't do that with you. The person gets to respond. That's a challenge, though. It's a real challenge.
And then relating back to earlier, could you say a little bit more about the federal policy regarding escaped slaves who went to the North?
So even though you could not import slaves into the United States after 1808, law passes 1807, 1808, slaves who were slaves, and their children, who are already slaves, were not allowed, if they traveled, they were illegally traveling. So they could be captured and forced to return home in 1850. They were forced to return back. And they didn't have the right to go to a court, and all you needed was some claimant to say, that's my slave, and they had to come back. So that law existed. That brought many a slave back into the South, and because they couldn't be tried, like it was saying, there were people just accused of being runaway slaves. They were brought back too, But that's what happened. It's part of it. That's our history. Our history is rooted in slavery. And when you hear that, and you hear that the police are getting bonuses for that, is there any question at all as to why African Americans fear the police, fear the government, want to know what they're up to, want to know why they're always guilty? How do you tell if you have a slave? All you need is to have somebody black who's not in the right place. That's all. That's Trayvon Martin's story. I mean, that's all. All of this is a part of the history that we experience today. I got to keep us moving. I don't know if there's a lot more questions you have.
No, we can. The next one relates to your next section, so we'll save it for then.
Okay, so I'm gonna now. Before I put you on a screen, I want to talk just a little bit about the spirituals. But let me see. I got so many things going on here. I kind of have to find where things are, and that might not be so easy. Okay, the slaves celebrate, the stories of Israel through song, that spoke of a God who sided with Israel when they were held slaves in Egypt and freeing them from their captors. And this is political oppression that was fueled by economic human exploitation, even for Egypt. The slaves found comfort in the words of Israel's prophet, who spoke about the uncommon boldness against the dominant political regimes. The slaves took to the good news of Jesus, who cared for the downtrodden and the outcast, and who gave sight to the blind and hearing to the deaf, and enabled the lame to walk, and most importantly, set the captive free. Slaves in America, they're tormented, they're tortured, they're whipped, they're raped by slave owners. They're equally exploited by everyday consumers, not simply slave owners, as most would like to think. They're in the South and the North, all of those who routinely purchase goods and food fueled from slavery as abusive economic machinery. We are all a part of the slavery that takes place in the world, so we can save a nickel on buying a shirt or a pair of tennis shoes or something else. That's how we participate. It is not just the people who live there. Amazingly enough, in the midst of such despicable hardship and anguish, there is not one vengeful word in any of these songs. Spirituals are about the power of song and struggle in the Black survivor. They are essential to the community of slaves, both in their identity and in their survival. It's really unity music that is pulling these people together. They spoke to this divine presence with the people that gave them courage and strength to make it through. But for us who listen, who sing, we have to grasp these contradictions of life experiences and spiritual longing that are inherent in all their stories. And as far as I'm concerned, it's not possible to do that without being deeply moved. How much suffering of this nature was a daily part of their lives. How much of that do we comprehend in our own lives? You know, how many of us are suffering with the pandemic? How many are simply just inconvenienced? How many are enjoying the extra time off? And I'm not trying to place any judgments. I'm just trying to tell you the challenges that help you understand, you know, the challenge.
David, you froze up on us.
Am I back on, Conway? Okay. You can hear me? I know I lost. Okay, I think Julie might have lost the connection on her end. I can't tell, you know, just what happened there. You know, so we see all this. It's slavery is not God's will as far as the slave is concerned. The difference, it's much of what we're seeing now, Black Lives Matter, except we're seeing this difference because whites are also aligning themselves in pursuit of liberty and justice for all. And theology and politics are by nature related. You know, they are connected. Religion asks, who is it you're going to serve? Who is it you belong to? How are you going to behave? Well, at the end of the Civil War, we saw colleges and universities for former slaves now built, coming out all over the South. Fisk College, Fisk University, is one of those that's going to come about. They're going to have a choir, 15 singers. They're going to be led by a Caucasian director. That director is going to teach them Eurocentric music, but he's going to notice in the breaks that they're singing these songs he doesn't know. Steal Away to Jesus. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. He has them sing for him. He arranges them. Then in 1871, he takes the Jubilee Singers on a tour, going to Oberlin, then going to New York. I mean, they'll come to the United States, San Francisco, they'll go to England, they'll travel all over, raising money to keep the college afloat. You know, that's what they had to do. But that's the first hearing of these spirituals that the public at large gets, because they were never written to be performed. These are the songs that are being sung on a plantation while people are working, are picking cotton, just to hold together. That's really their function. So that's how they come about. And then within 50 years, there's all these arrangers bringing them to us: Harry Burleigh, R. Nathaniel Dett, William Dawson, Hall Johnson, Eugene Simpson, Jasper Harrison. They're all a part of that, bringing them forward. Many of you have sung those with me. You know, if you've sung with me, you've encountered over 50 of them, I'm sure. So now I'm going to put you on a shared screen again and play you various recordings of these and kind of talk you through them. As soon as I find one. This first one I'm going to play, I've Been Buked. We sang it not too many years ago. Hall Johnson, the arranger. You know, he was an arranger. He's from Atlanta, Georgia, born in the late 1880s. He forms the Hall Johnson Choir. They're going to perform movies, several movies: Green Pastures, Cabin in the Sky, the Disney Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Song of the South, Dumbo. He's going to be the preacher crow in When I See an Elephant Fly. And he writes about spirituals. True enough, this music was transmitted to us through humble channels, but its source is that of all great art everywhere: the unquenchable, divinely human longing for a perfect realization of life. It traverses every shade of emotion without spilling over in any direction. Its most tragic utterances are without pessimism, and its lightest, brightest moments have nothing to do with frivolity. In its darkest expression, there was always a hope. In this particular spiritual, it's speaking about the suffering and the pain that the slave, that's what the slave is lamenting. I've been rebuked and I've been scorned. And then verse 3, ain't gonna lay this religion down. You know, to the 19th century African-American slave who are experiencing all this stuff, beatings, daily all around them, loss of life, that part of it is not even up for grabs. You know, I do believe it's very hard for concert and church audiences, even singers, to empathize with the depth of promise that lies behind the words being offered here. And we have to again realize these were never created for a concert stage or a church choir loft where we hear them today. They're written and sung by slaves being exploited in a foreign land. So let me play you this first one.
Stop the video. Forward too much. Forward too much. No, just he's going to do something. Yeah, I know.
David, did you mean to share the video?
Yes. I didn't do that?
No.
You guys are so sharp.
We try.
Why don't you share screen at the bottom?
I have to click a few other things on. There we go. Now you got it, right?
Yes.
Yep.
You know, that was Florida A&M. That's a historical black college. There's little did the slave owner know that many of these songs are filled with these coded messages. That they often were talking about escape, where the slave would pass the word on that there was going to be an escape by the song that they chose to sing. So I'm going to play you a variety of those. You know, heaven didn't mean just heaven in the sky. Heaven meant getting to freedom. Mostly meant getting to the north, getting on that Underground Railroad train. The Jordan River was any stream, any body of water that could wash the scent off the slaves' clothes so that they couldn't be pursued by the hounds. Wade in the water is one of those spirituals. It recalls an historical event. You got to remember that Christianity is not the language of the slave, not the religion of these slaves. It's a religion that is imposed upon them to justify their slavery by the Christian owners, and they are Christian, who have bought them. So they take pride, and the slaves take to the stories. Like I told you, they get the stories. So this one is out of the fourth gospel. There's this healing pool. There's this man who's been paralyzed 38 years, but he hasn't managed to be able to get into that water when it stirs, when the water is troubled, when it will provide healing. We're talking 38 years here. This might teach us more about our own desire or fear of actually being healed than anything else. And it's being performed by the Jubilee Singers from Fisk University.
Trouble the water, wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. See that old star dressed in white. God's gonna trouble the water. The leader looks like an Israelite. God's gonna trouble the water. To wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Well, I stepped in the water and the water was cold. God's gonna trouble the water. It chilled my body, but not my soul. God's gonna trouble the water. I know to wade in the water. Wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. If you don't believe I believe, God's gonna trouble the water. Well, just follow me down to Jordan Street. God's gonna trouble the water. I know you wade in the water. Wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. God's gonna trouble the water. God's gonna trouble the water.
Singers, university singers, Jubilee singers have stayed their same size. 15, 16, that's the size that choir has been historically. Another one, Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, recounts the story of Elijah's free trip home to heaven, the close of his life, and he's going to be met by angels. It's about getting up to the north, finding freedom, venturing to escape. If you get there before I do, tell all my friends I'm coming too. And this is one of the earliest recordings of it in the early 1900s by a quartet of singers from Fisk College, including John Work. You know, the arrangement we do of This Little Light of Mine is John Work III, grandson of his, who became a director there at Fisk as well. We'll play a little bit of this.
Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. I'm sometimes up, I'm sometimes down, coming for to carry me home. To still my soul feel the heavenly bound, coming for to carry me home.
Just going to stop it there so I can keep us moving and get us a little back on track. Simple Harmony, 1909. You know, simple arrangements. That's what these were. They're probably more authentic in terms of harmony back there than what we hear today in the arrangements, which vary. But we must remember, they're all arrangements. Everything is an arrangement. Nothing was sung like that. I'm going to play you a different arrangement of this song that reflects more of a gospel style upbeat, but it's all the same spiritual. It is all the same theme. See what you think about this group, this a cappella group who's singing.
Swing low, my sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, my sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, my sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, my sweet chariot. Hey, I just wanna go home. Swing low, sweet chariot, and carry me home. Come on and swing down, chariot, stop and let me ride.
Swing down, chariot, stop and let me ride.
Why don't you rock me, Lord?
Come and easy, I got a home on the other side.
6 white horses prancing side by side.
6 white horses prancing
side by side. I want you to rock me, Lord.
Come and easy,
I've got a home on the other side. Swing low, and let me ride. Swing low, let it take your wind down in the middle of the field. Said he saw him your way, chariot wheel. Wasn't too particular about the chariot wheel. He just wanted to know how the chariot feel. Swing down, chariot, stop and let me ride.
Swing down, chariot, stop and let me ride.
Rock me, Lord, coming easy. A home on the other side. Swing.
A cappella sings only sacred music, and they sing a lot of spirituals. In case you want to pursue them, you can see what's there just on YouTube to hear them. They're a great group. And you hear a different excitement, the same thing, a different excitement about freedom. Another one of those same, in the same genre, Deep River. I want to cross over into campground. You know, the water's chilly and deep, but it's all the same. It's all the same metaphors as we have before. This version is sung by Marian Anderson, the greatest contralto of her era, African American. She's born in Philadelphia, 1897. She learns to sing in church, basically. She goes to school, tries to get into a certain college. They won't accept her because it's racial discrimination against her. But she'll have a great teacher who exposes her, gets her in a competition. She wins. She'll sing for various orchestras. She'll travel to Europe, Scandinavia in particular. Sol Hurak will represent her. She'll come back and look to do a concert in 1939 in Washington, D.C. And she's appeared there at Howard and other halls, but she's trying to get into the Premier Hall, Constitutional Hall. But it's run by the Daughters of the American Revolution, and they have a policy that only white artists can perform, and they won't allow her to perform. Eleanor Roosevelt, president's wife at the time, she's a member of the DAR. Not anymore. She tells them, I'm out of here, and I'll find you a place to perform. And she schedules a performance for Marian Anderson on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial on Easter Sunday, 1939, and she will perform to 70,000 people. And that concert is on YouTube. And she will open with My Country 'Tis of Thee. And the song, the spiritual that she made famous was Deep River. And you can just hear the depth of her voice, the passion of these songs that meant so much to her.
My
an amazing voice? 16 years later, she'll become the first African American to sing at the Met. And they will make her an honorary member of the Met at that point. Then there's another group of spirituals that I want to play, you know, where we see God siding with the underdog, you know, which the slave can relate to. The one that's supposed to lose at all odds. Everything's against them. But resiliency is in play. And they don't give up hope because they know which side God is on. And it's not being measured in this time period because they know death is not the final word. One of those, Joshua fit the battle of Jericho and the walls come tumbling down. This Israelite leader who's walking around Jericho and Canaan, he's supposed to take that city, it's walled. He has to walk around it 6 days with his people. 7th day, go around it 7 times, blow the trumpets, the walls collapse just as promised, and all the people inside the walls, they're all killed, except for one, you know. And this is not just a miracle, it's a political miracle. It's one that acknowledges the limited boundaries of political leadership. You know, this first version I'm going to play you is Moses Hogan's group. Moses Hogan, spiritual arranger, life cut short here at age 45 with a brain tumor. This is his group and his arrangement singing that. Oh no, this one is, take it back. It's his arrangement, but it's Cal State Long Beach singing it.
It's the battle of Jericho, Joshua fit the battle. It's the battle of Jericho, Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, 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 Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, and the walls come tumbling down. It's the battle of Jericho, Joshua fit the battle. It's the battle of Jericho, Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, 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 Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, and the walls come tumbling down. Jericho, Joshua fit the battle, it's the battle of Jericho. Talk about your kings of Gideon, talk about your men of Saul. It's not done like good old Joshua and the battle of Jericho. And morning Joshua, the battle of Jericho, 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 Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, and the walls come tumbling. Joshua fit the battle, it's the battle of Jericho. Joshua fit the battle, it's the battle of Jericho. Right up to the wall of Jericho, he marched with spear in hand. Lo, that all Joshua cried. Was the battle lamb made my hand? God Almighty, then the lamb and she was began to love, and Joshua began to laugh. Joshua commanded the church to shout, and the walls come tumbling down. Oh Lord, you know that Joshua fit the battle, yes, the battle of Jericho. Joshua fit the battle, yes, the battle of Jericho. Joshua fit the battle, yes, the battle of Jericho. The walls come. Oh Lord, you know that Joshua fit the battle, yes, the battle of Jericho. Joshua fit the battle, yes, the battle of Jericho. Joshua fit the battle, yes, the battle of Jericho.
Nicely done. I want to play you another version of the song done by the Queen of Gospel, Mahalia Jackson. She's with Martin Luther King, who she traveled with regularly. He's preaching in Chicago, and she's going to lead the audience in this song spontaneously. And I want you to try and sense the difference between a concert version and what's happening here.
Georgia fit the battle of Jericho.
I can say concerning this great gospel singer in our midst, our dear friend, my great friend Mahalia Jackson, that a voice like this comes only once in a millennium.
That's absolutely true. You sense the difference between a concert version and singing with the people who are not on stage looking for any applause. You sense the depth of what the story means, what it means to celebrate freedom over oppression, to celebrate hope when there never seems to be any. It's against all odds. That's what you sense here. That's what these songs were totally about. Another one, Oh Mary, don't you weep, don't you mourn. Mixing two biblical stories, Mary, Martha, Lazarus who's dying, two sisters and a brother, Jesus who comes and raises one. She's weeping and mourning, but the songwriter is saying, don't worry, Mary, let me remind you of another story. Pharaoh's army drowned in the Red Sea. We now go back to the story of Israel leaving Egypt and the sea parting and Moses leading them through, and Pharaoh's army goes after them, and then the seas come back and they drown the army. It's again one of those songs about hope. And this one by Al McNeil, my junior high teacher.
Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you mourn. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you mourn. Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, Mary, don't you weep. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you mourn. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you mourn. Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, Mary, don't you weep. Some of these mornings, bright and fair, take my wings and keep the air. Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, Mary, don't you weep. When I get to heaven, I'm gonna sing and shout. Nobody there gonna turn me out. Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, Mary, don't you weep. When I get to heaven, I'm gonna put on my shoes, run about glory and tell all the news. Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, Mary, don't you weep. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you mourn. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you mourn. Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, Mary, don't you weep.
And again, I want to play you another version done by Take Six, a group of 6 guys who sing a cappella, again, religious songs. And this is back in the late 80s. I got to hear them live at a convention. They are absolutely stunning. But listen to the spin they put on the song.
Well, I'm singing Mary. Oh, Mary, don't you weep. Tell Father not to mourn. Don't you mourn.
Whoa, my...
Oh, Mary, don't you weep. Tell Mother not. Mother, don't you mourn. Don't you know they got drowned on the Red Sea? Singing Mary.
her knees to tell her to marry. Oh, baby, don't you weep. She don't have to cry. Oh, baby, don't you weep. You gotta tell her yes, sir, but I don't know. Oh, baby, don't you weep. You don't have to worry about the problem. Oh, baby, don't you go. Oh, no. I'm not worried about tomorrow. If you're joy for your sorrow, don't you cry. Oh, cry, no, no. Oh, baby, don't you weep. 'Cause Pharaoh's army's been drowned. Pharaoh's army drowned in the sea. Drowned in the Red Sea. Singing, Mary, oh, Mary, don't you weep. Tell mother not to mourn. Tell mother not to mourn.
Get much better than that. I'll play you one more from the Aeolians from Oakwood University. And Take 6 is from Oakwood University. That's where these 6 guys all went to school, met as freshmen and sophomore in college. This last one, My Lord, What a Morning When the Stars Begin to Fall. William Dawson arrangement. You know, you hear the trumpet sounds. It's the start of a new day, new possibilities, one without pain, no more suffering. We'll end with this one. I'm going to take you off shared screen, get you back here. You know, spirituals are always deeply moving for me. It's hard for me to hear them and not get emotionally wrapped up. And you can just imagine how that would be amplified for people who actually live the life of African Americans through slavery in our country. What that would mean again. It's not just the beauty of melody, and of course there's the arrangements and all of that. It's the power within the text and the passion within the people that are singing. You're watching a lot of historical black colleges sing these with a close heritage to the meanings of these songs. Well, I'm going to answer a few questions. I know next week I'm looking at blues and jazz with you. I'm going to send you questions that I hope you'll discuss with somebody and contemplate. I will send you the playlist I played, including the songs I did not play. There's just no limit to how much you can inform yourself and revel in this music. You like Take Six? Go listen to all the recordings. They're all on YouTube. You want to hear more of Marian Anderson, and who wouldn't? Go find her. And it's all of things that were never available to us are now available. So make use of that. But I hope that you'll be back next week as we now see word blues, which is really, that's very closely related to gospel, the secular side of spiritual music. And then the world of jazz, of improvisation, making step up from a culture who has had to make everything up since they got off that boat. So it'll be a good time. Thanks for checking in. If you got, Julie, you got questions, I'll answer them if you want to stay on. And if you want to stay on later, I'll stay on for another 20 minutes. You want to just talk or have questions. Julie, you got anything for me?
Yes. One question was, could you make some connections between music from Africa and West Africa and how it connects to this music?
I can't do specifically because I'm not a musicologist like that. My colleague at Merit is. She's been to the countries and determined. But here's a mistake we make. We think of Africa like we think of North Carolina. Africa's 59 countries, you know. You're in Nigeria, there's 20 religions and about 4 or 5 major dialects. You know, it's a very complex culture, and they were all impacted by Europe differently. It's immense. The climate zones, the food they eat, it's just so diverse. So it's not easy for me to, I wouldn't know to say, this one brought this, and I can tell you general things. When we talk about the banjar came from African culture over to here, as did many wood instruments, many drumming instruments, and so forth. And the nature of the songs, the call and response, the chorus. You see the chorus, swing low, sweet chariot, verse, swing low, sweet chariot, verse, that back and forth, constant. That's all out of African culture, but I can't speak country to country because it's much more than I know. I'm not an expert in that area at all. What else?
No other specific questions, but there was a lot of interesting comments in the chat about the hidden messages in many of these songs. In case there's anything more you want to say about that.
Well, we became aware of the hidden messages because of Frederick Douglass. He wrote about that back in his time to inform us that those words meant something else, and that they were transmitting messages that were speaking to escape, not just desire. On the other hand, you know, you got to remember, you think of yourself as a parent with children, and you're caught up in this slavery, and you have kids. You just might be willing to, and you're getting beaten. And you just might be willing to tell your kids, look, it's going to be a moonless night, these 5 nights. And there's no fences. All you got to do is get from here to there and cross that river and get into that town. And the rumor is, third house down on the 4th Street, they're friendly to slaves. They'll get you to the underground and you'll get up north. I want you to go. And the songs are signaling it's time to go. Follow the drinking gourd. You know, where the Big Dipper. Go north, look for the North Star, follow it, you know. So the songs had that meaning, but they also have a deep meaning just in their belief. They took to the Christian faith. You know, I can't make generalization. I shouldn't make generalizations. But from my own experience, they took to the Christian faith much more than many of the Christian churches that I've been associated with in my life, and that probably include myself in the story as well. They believed in these promises, you know, and maybe that happens because there is no hope anyplace else. You have to rely on something beyond yourself. And so it's the driving force. So when you see Mahalia Jackson singing Joshua Fit the Battle in a church, how many of you go to churches and you're going to start that song and you're going to see that enthusiasm in your audience? Is it going to happen? And why not? Because there isn't the feeling, or they're so constrained with them, they can't. We as a white culture sort of had, and I say we, knowing my culture is a little different, have had the emotion sort of beaten out of us. You're just supposed to sit still. The most you do is stand and sit, right? You know, it's hard to know. It's hard to put it all together. But you when you hear it, you see it like this, you realize the depth of passion that is in these songs, and just again understand they are all written before 1865. Those tunes, they're old. No one's writing these in 1910. They're writing the arrangements, but the songs and the words, they're all pre-Civil War. Anything else that's simple, you know, question?
We like to give you hard questions.
You give me hard questions. I just want to answer them.
And no, there were a lot of folks that were commenting on what you just said about how we mostly know these songs as a Europeanized version, you know, the choir arrangements that we hear.
Yes. I remember as a kid, one of the first spirituals I learned, because I played the piano when I was very young, like 7, 8 years old. I was playing in church, you know, and I remember playing Baptist church. I remember Every Time I Feel the Spirit, and I remember being taken by what I now know as the syncopation. I didn't know, I hadn't had a clue what that was then, but no one used that word. But I remember how great that is, you know, my own excitement on the musical end of enthusiasm. And of course, in the Mexican church, we sang with a lot of gusto. And we had to sit, stand, and kneel, and shout, and, you know, so we had a little bit more going on there. But spirituals, boy, they're gripping in the hands of people who really capture their meaning. They're very powerful songs. I hope you'll do more about that in listening to more of them and trying to grab hold of this history. What it means to not have hope. You can't count on the government. What that must mean. So many of us, we might not like the government, but we count on it. It's sending me my, Medicare check, or unemployment insurance, or we count that it's there. There's nothing here. They have to count it. They have to count on something that goes way beyond what we can even imagine. That culture, and that is the challenge in a world where Black lives really matter. African Americans still have to count on something that goes way past government intervention. You know, it goes way beyond that. Okay, I will put you on the gallery view. If any of you want to hang around, talk, I'll be glad to just say hi to you. And you can take your mics off if you want to hear from me. I see Suzette, she's still awake. That's good. Rhonda's there in the mix. She knows a lot about these stories. I can tell you that. And good to see Grayson. And gee, Jeff's there. You know, and Colleen, you stayed awake in Pittsburgh time. That's impressive. You know.
David.
Yes.
Right. I've always I wondered if the enslaved people the South identified with the innocent suffering of Jesus. There's a big similarity in my mind. Their experience, and if that might.
I don't know. I mean,
might have attracted them to Christianity also. They identified with that suffering.
It could be. It's because it's a generalization. It'd be hard for me to say, oh well, yeah.
Right. But But in my mind, I mean, I see it from the outside.
Yes. So I would go so far as to say, you know, I'd go so far as to say that we identify with things that are close to our story, or if not close historically to our story, they tap the same emotion.
Right.
Looks like Rhonda.
Of
Rhonda
hope,
did want to
fear.
say something about.
Yeah,
Did
that
you
I
say
would
something
say.
about that, Rhonda? Or another question?
Yeah, Rhonda.
Yes, if you don't mind.
Yes.
I wanted to speak a little bit on that only because I come from that culture.
Yes.
The slaves were considered heathenistic because of their religious practices in Africa. So their slave owners would allow them to go to the churches. They had to sit in the upper balcony parts of the churches. They didn't know the language, but after so many years, they began to understand the English language and understand the King James Version of the Bible, and they started relating to the Hebrews. And the whole first part of the Bible, the Old Testament, is about Hebrew history. It's the Torah pretty much, and everything that happened before Christ. So that's why the slaves played their songs to the plight of the Israelites who were in Egypt. It's a very, very strong relationship. Even to this day, we still sing those songs.
Yeah, and you can see why. The slaves took to the prophets and they took to the stories of the Israelites. Absolutely, you know. And we don't, in the Christian churches that I worked in, we don't do a lot with the prophets, you know. And the stories are just kind of fun-loving. David and Goliath, well, those are also, these underdog stories are powerful. And you do have to remember the cultural differences of those who stayed, the Europeans who came here to America. You're talking Puritans, right? You're talking, clothes up to the neck and no buttons and down to the toe, and separation of body and soul, and the body's evil and the soul is pure. And then you're bringing slaves who decorate their bodies, and Native Americans who have feathers in their hair and paint. And I mean, it's just, they really think it's a rationalization because they want slaves, and it's economically driven. But the rationalization will be, well, we need to help make these people at least one step closer to being human. So we need to Christianize them. We need to get them to get the story. We're not going to free them, but we need to get them to believe the stories. We don't have to free them because the Bible says slaves obey your masters. So the Bible justifies it. We're okay. So all of that is in the mix, and then it's played out differently by every person who's playing it out. But it's just a horrific life, and it defines our culture. It defines American culture. Civil War is 150 years ago, 155 years ago. It ends. I mean, this is not for, you know, when I'm born, it's not even been 100 years. You know, it's not that long ago, and it's still. And then you see how all the steps we've taken back. You know,
Looks like Lonnie has her hand up as well.
Yeah, Lonnie.
Hi. I just wanted to say James Cone's book, The Cross and the Lynching Tree,
Yes.
of it is discussing, yes, you're familiar with it, discusses the link between African American Christianity and the story of Jesus, his entire life and what it meant. It's a fabulous read if you haven't read it. It's kind of tough to get through, but it's really wonderful.
He's a great writer. He's in James Cone, C-O-O-N. He writes a book on blues and spirituals.
Right.
He
Right.
writes on a lot of themes. He is worth your reading. He's a brilliant theologian. Very insightful. Absolutely.
What was the reference again, please?
James Cone. And
C-O-E-N.
C-O-O.
No, C-O-E-N.
C-O, are you sure?
I think so.
I don't.
I'll look
I'll put it in the chat. C-O-N-E. James Cone.
Oh, C-O-N-E. There we go. Oh, okay.
I put it in the chat.
Thank you, Lenny.
I got it on my Kindle list, so I can just check it. But yeah, good. So you got that, and I'll put that in my notes so you can just see what that where that is also. Well, anybody else just saying hi before you go to bed? You ready to go to bed? Get ice cream? Do something?
Just about.
I gave you a big book list in case you want to delve in someplace.
Yeah, well, I've been doing it.
Time to read. Time to keep growing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great having you all on here. Hi, Kate.
Okay, We're going into jazz.
Oh, you're going to still. Okay.
Good night.
Thanks, Julie.
Good night.
Night.
Thanks.
Night.
Thank
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Jude.
Thanks so much.